Welcome to the Rabia Sana Show. We're two Desi girls reinventing cultural norms with love to make difficult conversations easier to help you take courageous steps faster.
Whether you feel like a misfit now or have been breaking the standards, this podcast is for you, for the adults, the young. Come as you be and become your authentic self as you desire. Let's go reinvent some cultural norms together.
Hello everyone, I am Rabia Sana. I have been a rebel without a cause for most of my life until I discovered my purpose to empower women to empower themselves. And that led me down a rabbit hole to become a life coach from CTI Coactive Coaching. And today I'm a mind and life power coach who helps people break free of their limiting cultural beliefs to find the life they love and the love of their life.
Hello everyone, I am Sana. I am from New Jersey, a Pakistani American. Professionally, I work in the clinical research field. And personally, I have always had this purpose of empowering women of South Asian culture to be able to live the life that they want to live and be true to themselves instead of what the culture expects them to be. And so here I am pursuing that purpose, and I am also studying to become a life coach. Let's get started.
Hello, amazing souls. Welcome to another episode of the Rabia Sana Show, the podcast where we reinvent cultural norms to elevate your mental, emotional, and relationship well-being. I'm Rabia Sana.
And I'm Sana Shah. Today we have a very special guest joining us, Jerry Mack. Jerry is a musician, an epiphany consultant, and a facilitator of self-inquiry through inquiry-based stress reduction. Jerry calls himself a slow mystic and a reluctant maverick. We're so thrilled to have you with us, Jerry. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me be here. I'm just laughing at my own description.
Well, it's always good to laugh at ourselves, right, Jerry?
Yeah, I'm an endless source of amusement.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about today's episode, and I can't wait to dive into your journey to explore how you're quietly yet powerfully redefining the way we think about freedom and connection. And so we're really curious, how did you come to describe yourself as a freedom maximalist and passive activist? And how does your philosophy connect to your work with inquiry-based stress reduction?
Yeah, it's all very much interrelated. The freedom maximalist side is, my commitment to internal freedom as well as external freedom. And that's how I come to internal freedom is self-inquiry. And the particular type of self-inquiry is the work of Byron Katie, and oftentimes that's referred to as inquiry-based stress reduction in more clinical terms. What I find is that the internal is the priority, and then what manifests outwardly is that sense of freedom and all of the characteristics of true nature, including, love, connection, and so forth. And so what I've found in my life, in my own experience, is that I'm always, even before anything internal, I've always been geared towards looking to find a freedom externally. And later on, as I said, that came to be something I sought internally. And, one of the examples of that could be Bitcoin. There's a lot of misconceptions about it, and as a matter of fact, that term freedom maximalist comes from that community. And there's a lot of seemingly misunderstanding about it. And that's really the reason I'm in that community, is because it seeks to maximize the human race's potential for freedom. And so what I find in general is that the more I can embrace the paradox of something like passive activist, you know, um, the more this balance occurs between the like internal, external, all the dualistic terms, So to get more specific, you know, when one does self-inquiry, the meditation, and you could say that that is a passive state. As a matter of fact, in my own experience, I've noticed how even in meditation, there can be an activist way of doing it. Like there's a kind of looking to apprehend an answer mentally, and that's not it. In doing the work meditation, it's seeking to find the state of receptivity and waiting for an answer rather than answer. A lot of people come at it with this conditioning, the way they were conditioned in school, which is to answer a question like on a test. Okay, what is the capital of Colorado? And, do I know it or I don't know it kind of thing, and just go on from there. Whereas with self-inquiry, it's waiting, and this does involve some trust in the process. It's waiting and trusting that what you need to know will show up when it does. And so it can be a really profound experience. And what I also found in that is that if I can adopt this place of trusting patience and focus, in that state, I have the calmness and peacefulness and self-love, all of it, which is what I'm looking for anyway, without even getting the answer. So just to contrast, coming back to the theme of passive and activist, I find that after having done this internal, which is maybe you could say is passive process, that it activates energy and a lightness that maybe you could say is activist, you know. And so that's what I say. It's like peace activism from an armchair because I'm coming from that place. Then, you know, it it radiates from me and what I do, how I am, how I'm being, what I say, etc. As I'm speaking, I'm reminded of Sri Ramana Maharshi from India, who died in the 50s, maybe. And he was the most recent example of somebody who taught self-inquiry. But the main way he taught it was just being. And people gravitated towards him because it's not that he wouldn't ever talk. It's just that the priority was to be the example of it.
That makes sense. What about when you are being, right? All the noise that comes up inside of you, how do you balance that part?
Yeah, that's a really good question because there have been times that the noise, the interruptions, the distractions, and I mean the internal ones, they can be overwhelming. And so for me, this process has to be gentle. And if it's not that way, then I'll just stop. You can see how resistance to resistance is just more resistance, you know. And so what I'll look to do is I'll just, you know, maybe go for stretch out, deep breaths, maybe get something to drink, and with the intention of coming back to it. And, this is what I always invite my clients to, is not to force this process. Um, because, this is, these, I always say that the work is easy. Um, and that's actually in contradiction to what my teacher, Byron Katie, says, that she says, I don't call it the work for nothing. Um, but there's a good reason I say that it's easy, is because when I'm in the work, there's an effortlessness to it. And when there's a distraction, there's a thought, oh, I've got something to do with blah, 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 or, oh, I should have done that, all these thoughts that interfere. Um, to me, that's, I think what she's referring to is like the distractions can make it seem hard. But if I'm actually in the work, it's easy, you know?
Right. So what I'm hearing, Jerry, is that when you're in the process, what Sana was asking, to truly be in that being is doing other things that don't feed that friction within ourselves.
The being part is, I don't try and micromanage outside of the meditation. I just will just speak and do as I do, you know. Now, this is not to say I don't have moments where, these thoughts come in, oh, I should do this or I should do that. But what I find is having done the meditation, the awareness in these situations is higher. So if I say, for example, I get triggered, you know, that makes me angry. Generally speaking, if there's anger there, you know, it is something that I will express, and I think this will probably explain it. This has kind of been the process that I've witnessed over the years of doing the work. In the past, I would get triggered, I would get angry, yell, rage, whatever it is, fight back, whatever the situation is. Then after doing this process, I don't know how long it was, maybe a year or two, I noticed that in one situation where I got that angry rage, that I it came out, but there was a strange sense of separation there. It was more that I was watching the anger show up, and so there was no, I wouldn't say that there was really no ability to stop it at that point, but it was just a very interesting thing. And I've heard Eckhart Tolle talk about this kind of thing. Um, and then the the next step after that, I noticed that the rage or anger showed up. I would get triggered, but I would have enough consciousness to express what I knew to be the truth, and it would come out in that angry tone. So, I called it, in retrospect, I called it conscious raging. And it was kind of something like this, like, I know you're not doing this on purpose. You're driving me crazy. I know it's not actually you, it's what I think. And can you cut me some slack? Can you maybe stop, blah, 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 and that kind of thing. And what was interesting was the person who I was with didn't get angry at that. And then the next stage of it, the the trigger comes, and there's that initial feeling, but then I, there's enough awareness not to act on it. And there's a noticing. It's like my attention turns to what's going on internally rather than externally. And so that's been the process for me. I think that describes best what you're asking.
Right. And that comes with a lot of work through meditation, through that awareness. And back to what you said, trust the process. These things will happen as long as you're in that process of allowing it to come forth, and not to force the answers, but actually let them come through you, which is that conscious mind and the need to know versus what is actually there. So that's amazing. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about reinventing cultural norms. So in that form that you filled out prior to this episode, you mentioned some interesting and fascinating topics. You mentioned honesty, close relationships with your exes, minimalism, heterodoxy, and embracing what is. Could you break it down one by one? How did honesty shape your life?
Mm. You know, I've uh, I've always had this tendency towards the truth for a long time. My daughter, one time when she was little, said to her friend when they were doing some kind of dancing choreographed thing, you know, and she said, "Yeah, don't mind my father. He tells the truth," you know. And so I've had this inclination, and I think it goes so well with all of the other aspects of who we truly are. Um, but anyway, in relationship to how it's shaped my life, what seems to be the case is that people can, and this is my view on it, it seems to me that people trust when I tell them I like this, I don't like that. I think here's what I would do, these kind of things. So I think that's probably the most direct answer that I could give you is that the effect of being progressively honest, it shows up in people trusting what you say, you know?
Right. And that's beautiful because what I'm hearing is it's actually a form of that freedom that we speak of when we can freely be ourselves. It's connected with freedom as well that you're a proponent of as well, right? And so that's
Mm.
wonderful. And what about close relationships with your exes? How has that shaped your life?
Yeah, I certainly can't take credit for 100% of that or ultimately any percent of it, but because they both uh, are on spiritual paths of their own. Um, and so it's that's been such an incredible blessing in my life. It's hard to even express how great it is. Certainly there's a cultural norm that exes are either enemies or distant, cordial relationships, and in my case, they're close relationships. It's funny, particularly with my ex-wife, I feel like it's the relationship that we were looking for, um, really all along. Because you go through this experience of, this infatuated love, and it's all encompassing and so incredible, all this. So you have, I don't know if it's the yin or the yang, but then we experience the downside of that or the opposite of it. And now we've come to the middle, you know, and being in that place of allowing each other's lives completely. You know, the other way I like to put it, I have a line in one of my songs called, and the line is referring to dancing and um, movement so profound, separate and together. And that's really, I think, describes it well. Um, that it's completely separate lives, but we're always we always have this connection, you know. And she says the same thing, so I don't doubt it.
Yeah, so it really sounds like as if you are reinventing these cultural norms, which are so mainstream, and you're being what feels right to you, but it's against what the normal society would be doing, like having good relationships with your exes, living a minimalist life. And so doing things different than what the mainstream culture is doing, what society is doing, that must come with its own, challenges, and people saying things to you, or people not even understanding where you are coming from a good place, although you're doing things which they would think is the normal, right? So how have you navigated around that, and what kind of things have come up that are, stopping you going down this path of doing things differently?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to not forget something that I was thinking of when it comes to the honesty thing. I noticed some years ago that there's seems to be this default mode that society seems to operate in, and I notice it in expressions like, "Let me just tell you the truth," to tell you the truth, or to be honest with you, or um, let me just between you and me, or that those kind of expressions. I notice they really kind of insinuate that we're kind of operating in this, you know, perpetual bullshit mode, you know? And so I think that's where the honesty can be fairly radical, you know? But when it comes to the challenges of that, you know, most people don't seem to want the truth, or at least I think that ultimately everybody does. But I also noticed one time that there's this expression that the truth hurts. And this is kind of almost like a culturally accepted or socially accepted belief. But what I noticed is that actually the truth never hurts. It's only the lie that comes in the back door that we don't notice that hurts. And you know that can be expressed in a lot of different ways. I think you know if, say, for example, you said, how you like my new haircut, and if I'm being what I think is completely honest, I'll say I don't like it. And so there's part of the truth, or what someone perceives as the truth and thinks that that hurts. But really, what has happened is the person who's receiving that the most truth that's available at the moment there might be thinking, "Oh, I look terrible," rather than actually what was really true was the other side is less than perfect. Let's put it that way. And so I think this is what's where we get lost is we're most of the time we're not completely aware of the truth. And this is why I love the work so much, because we're getting the full picture finally. You know, we're and the Buddhists talk about ignorance. And where I've seen that is that in the moment that we think X, it could be positive or negative, but let's say it's negative. Oh, the world's coming to pieces. We're ignoring, well, maybe the world is bringing down old paradigms to clear the way for new paradigms, or new ways of being, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole truth is I think shifting a cultural norm.
When you were talking about the truth, it reminded me of the movie A Few Good Men. And, the question was, I want the truth. And the response was, you can't handle the truth. And it's not necessarily that it hurts. It's hard to hear the truth, but actually a lie will hurt us much more than the truth. But like you're saying, because we interpret that truth in a certain way. And from it doesn't look good to, the color could have been darker, like I'm talking about my own hair now. But I'm just saying that it's how we interpret the truth, which actually determines whether it hurts us or whether it empowers us as well. It empowers us as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a great example because you can see how both sides can only have half of or half the awareness of what's really going on there. Um, and if I say no, I don't like it, you know, well, that's a little bit of the truth. The rest of the truth is, you know, it's our relationship is really important to me, and I hope that this doesn't upset you, you know, and I find I prefer the way it was, or blah 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 blah. I want to like it, and I'm not there yet, kind of thing, But like what you were saying is like whatever the other person can say, ultimately at the end of the day, you're going to hear it through your own filters or your own beliefs about yourself. So, you know, you could say the most loving thing and it can be interpreted as something negative. I was doing the work years ago with a partner to get certified. She said something that really resonated with me. I said, wow, yeah, that's really good. And she took it as patronizing. And I was in shock. It took me by surprise. You know, it wasn't my intention. So there you go. It's at the end of the day, we're left with our own story of what's happening, what's being said, etc.
Yeah, I wanted to go through all of the points that you made, but I'm really enjoying going deeper into honesty. I think that sometimes we need to go deeper into certain things. And one more thing that came up is one thing is to be honest with people, and the other thing is to radically be honest. And sometimes being radically honest can hurt people. Like you can be blunt about things versus saying the same thing in two different ways. Both are honest, both are truthful, but saying it one way will have a softer landing than saying it another way. And then that's for the person that's conveying the truth to have that mindfulness about what is the impact that I could potentially have on someone. So I think that there is that balance between honesty and taking ownership of how we're impacting how someone responds to it as well. Because all our, like, there's one part is me in every relationship, but I'm having a relationship with another person as well. So to be mindful of that person is also a part of that process of honesty, in my opinion.
Yeah, the truth can be used as a blunt weapon, or it can be used to connect. If I really say what I mean, which infers that I have to have the awareness of that. If I really say what I mean, it won't sound mean.
Mm.
And that's what I've discovered at the end of the day. And, if I'm telling the truth and what I think is the truth, and maybe there's some impatience mixed in there, or, if I'm trying to manipulate the other's approval or appreciation, I might modify it, I might dance around it, but, and that typically is, you know, um, something that's going on internally with me where I just haven't found the truth to be able to speak it,
Mm.
you know? And so, for me, the answer there is like, I'm not clear yet. Like if for example, do you like my haircut? It might be the answer is, I'm not sure yet. Ask me again later, you know, if that's the truth, you know. If I'm not clear, check back with me. Ask me again. You know, once again, to refer to my teacher here, she'll say, like, can I just find the simple truth in the moment? Okay, so do I like your haircut? I'm stressed because I'm worried that you're going to take this the wrong way.
Mm.
Mm.
You're going to hear it as something negative.
Right.
And, just this
Yeah.
simple truth.
Well, so I'm going to share something that happened between both of us without giving too many details. I shared something, I shared a point of view that I have at the moment with Sana. And the response that I got from Sana is, "You're being judgmental." And and I said, "You're right." I owned it. I said, "You're right. I'm being judgmental," rather than defending myself. It was a simple truth. And that when you said the simple truth, that made me remember this conversation that we're having, rather than denying it, resisting it, or taking it in any other direction. I owned it. And there is a truth in I didn't like it, right? It didn't hurt me because I knew that she's speaking her truth, but I owned it. Yes, I was being judgmental. And the other thing that's coming up that we don't have time for today, but I hope that we can have a conversation about it through this honesty topic, because it's so powerful, and we can go just talk about this for the whole episode as well, is the nonviolent communication that you talk about, of how to be expressing ourselves, and how to have those conversations that are not projected as threatening or invasive or hurtful. So yeah, we'll save that for another time. But I just wanted to add that piece as well.
I think that really puts it into perspective, Rabia, as an example. And the one thing I know, I want to move on from this too, but what he said is so powerful about, if the truth is what you're actually feeling, it should not come out as hurtful. Because I'm thinking of the times where I have been hesitant of saying something because I think it's going to hurt the other person. But I think it's also because I'm also adding a little bit of judgment to that truth. And that's why it would be hurtful to that person. And so I think that was a really important way of being honest as well, to look at your own judgment in that truth that may be hurtful to somebody else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because what that comes down to, that gets deeper into it, as I see. And, like if I see this haircut, maybe it's really short or purple or shaved, with words, who knows? There's all kinds of creativity that goes on with haircuts. And so if I'm comparing that to the all the haircuts I've seen in the past, so all that conditioning, you could say, is what I'm um, comparing it to, then I'm really not present, you know. So I'm only seeing comparisons. And if I'm present, I can see how there wouldn't be any haircut I wouldn't like.
Right. So you're judging based on your own perspective.
Yeah, and you can see how maybe a haircut you might associate with somebody who was really nice to you in the past, um, or you saw in a related to other things. You know how these associations work, they get connected. And like like somebody's name. Like Rabia, when I met you, never heard the name before, so there's no association, you know. So it's like this really neutral place.
I have an example for that. So as a single person, you're online dating, right? And you meet someone with the same name as your ex-husband,
Oh.
right?
Yes.
And that's happened to me a few times, right? You meet, and I'm like, oh, never again am I dating anyone.
No way. No way. Swipe left right away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't even get to know a person. You just outright, you have an association with that name. It has context, it has memory, it has triggers. So you don't even want to go there. And I think the word that, like, when we project what we're thinking onto other people, that I will be hurting them if I say this, or I don't want to go there because they're going to respond in a certain way, and I just don't have the time and patience to go into this conversation with them. That's that passive approach, but not the way you're describing passive. It's not passive active, it's passive, but it'll show up in other ways if we don't have that conversation. So it's better to do the work and process it, and allow ourselves to heal, because a lot of those triggers do require us to pay attention to them and heal.
You mentioned something that reminded me of something. There's this assumption that the other person is not going to react well to what you're actually seeing. And I had this experience years ago, following one of the events in the work, public events. I guess it was a school for the work. Anyway, this woman I was speaking to, she said, at one point in the conversation, she goes, "Oh yeah, it's nice to meet you. I actually thought you were weird, you know." And I'm especially having been through, I think about 9 days of the work. I thought it was so refreshing to hear that. Like when I heard it, I was like, "Thank you." I don't know if I actually said thank you, but it was something I felt thank you. And I said, that's really refreshing. Yeah, I said refreshing to hear that, right? And later on, maybe a week or two later or whatever, I talked to her wherever it was, and she said, "Oh, I felt bad that I said that I thought you were weird." I told her, I said, don't feel bad. It was nice to hear, you know, somebody telling it like the way they see it. And here again, I'm just assuming that's how she saw it. We ultimately don't know what other people think, 'cause, we have our motives for saying what we say, but it felt good to me, it worked for me.
Yeah, and one more point, because this is so interesting, and it's bringing up other thoughts that sort of are connected. It also depends on the relationship that you have with that person and what pre-existing triggers are. So if someone from that, someone you had that relationship with said, "Oh, you're so weird," it will land totally differently than a brand new
Absolutely.
person that's just speaking their truth. There's no history to associate. Oh, now they're telling me I'm weird today. So they've been thinking this all along. I've had that situation, and we can, like I said, we can go into this, till the end of the day. It'll go way beyond this episode, because these conversations are
Mm.
they're so they're so deep, and there's so many layers. But I wanted to ask you, so you also brought in minimalism and heterodoxy. I think I'm saying that correctly. Can you sort of explain to us both of these and how they have shaped your life?
Yeah, minimalism, it's it can show up in a lot of different ways. It can show up in just not saying anything. Whereas before, it would just always talk, 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 talk. There seems to never be a period, you know. And then it can also show up in lifestyle, like um, drastically reducing the amount of clothes I have. You know, I think I have borderline 3 pairs of pants, like maybe 4 or 5, depending on what the occasion is. So it's the simplification of everything, I think. Um, you know, Not having a car, so that's another external example of it. Um, Minimalizing the internal self-talk during meditation show happens of itself naturally when I sit there long enough, you know. So it removes the blocks to awareness. There you go. That's the internal minimalizing. Uh, um, Heterodoxy. I, I figured I might just kind of tell a story. I may have told you already, Rabia. Um, when I was a kid in gym class, I had this moment of insight. Um, and it was in grade school, and the gym teacher was absent, and we had just a substitute, and they gave us the basketball, and we ran around the gymnasium trying to get the ball and shoot it in the hoop. And I found it, I was always so frustrated because we just were this pack of running kids trying to always get this ball. And at one moment, I noticed, and the noticing to me here is key. I noticed the ball always seemed to go where there was nobody. And I thought, as soon as I saw it, I stopped. And you could say that that's part of the minimalism too, even the heterodoxy. It's just I stopped and I waited, and it was seconds. I don't know, it was 30 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever it was, but I got the ball and I got the shot, you know. And I wasn't any good at basketball. It didn't matter. I just wanted to get my shot, you know. And so that kind of almost set the stage for um, my life to be looking like outside of where the herd is running to, you know. And it certainly has its disadvantages, there's no doubt, but they're really worth giving up. In the long run, I don't feel like they're disadvantages, but the tension comes in when there is this story that's so dominant in the culture. It's like follow these typical patterns and the conditioning. You know, it's like, oh well, you know, I don't, you know, look at this guy. I've got a summer home, and he, you know, and oh, they're still married in the traditional sense. You know, and there's this temptation to go to fall back into uh, a way of seeing the world that doesn't serve me at all. And so that shows up, and it's okay because it's good because it shows me what I've got left to question.
Yeah. So, Jerry, you said what it means to you, minimalism is a reflection of mental clarity. The less you have, the more space is cleared up. Can you explain that? How does this make you feel mentally, and how has minimalism helped you in your life and shaped your life's experience?
Yeah, it's it's not getting bogged down in the negative thinking. Um, so some years ago, I was visiting California, and I had the opportunity. Somebody offered me the opportunity to live and work out there, and I just didn't hesitate. So in the past, it would be like, oh, I don't know, this is such a big move, you know. I'm used to being in Boston with all my friends and family, and um, oh, what if it doesn't work out? There wasn't any of that. I just said, okay, when? I think that's a good example of internal minimalism, you know, because, you know, when you see what's true, you move to it seamlessly. There's not that blockage there, you know.
Mm.
Um,
Alignment. I'm hearing that you're totally aligned with who you are, what you want. There's this, it comes from within versus from the thoughts of what could go wrong and how things could happen.
yeah, the whole idea is that there's not this internal clutter. I think that's the clearest way I could put it.
Yeah. So I recently visit Japan a lot because of my work. I work with the Japanese company. And so this is something which has recently really I've become aware of, where I noticed the simplicity in their culture. And there's so much elegance with it. Like if you go into the most high-ranking restaurant, the decor is so minimal and so simple. And yet it just looks so beautiful. And the amount of work that probably went into it was also less. The cleaning is also less, right? So there's also extra things around it which are less. And it's just so beautiful that I also didn't realize in my life. And I come and look and I'm like, why am I buying all these things? And it's also, the little dopamine hits that you get from getting something new. Something new is now coming, and it makes me feel good at the moment. But in the long term, it was just taking up mental space and physical space too.
Yeah, there's a yin for every yang, and vice versa.
Yeah. That's powerful, Sana. I think that that minimalistic approach is simplifying life and decluttering, like Jerry,
Yeah.
that you're speaking about, that internal and external clarity. It shows up in the external as minimalism. And I did this in 2013. I made a deliberate choice that I will detach from material things. And so, and I've seen that my life has shrunk in terms of possessions and things, but it has expanded in terms of clarity. And I feel that I'm much more connected with who I am versus what determines who I am. Like there's this, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful mental clarity, but also I see it as less is more. That not having so many things to juggle, to shift, it does make life very much simple.
Yeah, recently I got really fascinated with a couple of documentaries about Francis of Assisi and how he got rid of absolutely everything in his life. And I'm fascinated with it because I'm not there yet, wanting to get rid of everything. But that extreme example, I marvel at this because I think, well, if I can see it even in the minimalizing of what I've got now in my own life, you can see that the principle can apply the more things you get rid of. And he seemed to live this joyous life of service and connection. And so, yeah, I'm really fascinated with the idea of getting rid of everything, but I'm not going to push myself beyond my evolution here. I'm just keeping my mind open to that idea and to see, what possibilities are there? How much could I push it? You know, but I think there's still lessons that can be gleaned from, getting rid of things. And I think this is the thing. At the end of the day, to just be bringing awareness to, okay, why do I want this? Am I keeping this for what? One of the things they say is if you haven't used it or thought about using it for 6 months, throw it away, you know? And so if there's an attachment to something, maybe it's, something, a memorabilia thing, you know? It's like to just be aware of, okay, this has no usefulness, but, you know, having an old picture, for example, of somebody I know, if that has some value to me, it's like let it let it be kind of thing, Okay, I'll keep a picture, you know, and I see like for example, or I've seen like Gandhi when he after he was assassinated, there was like just he had his glasses, he had a book of prayers, he had some sandals, and it was very very minimal possessions, and so I think to that too. So anyway, it's I think in the at the end of the day, it's just a process, and you move towards it and do it mindfully, you know.
For sure. And I think you beautifully just described embracing what is as well, living that simple and profound life and just creating that alignment and being. that big word that we started our conversation with as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so however it feels right to you, right to your own being and your own self-inquiry.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we wrap up and wind down, I want to touch on some challenges and growth as well that you've had along this journey. Why is it so important to create these new norms?
I think it starts at a young age with a sense of dissatisfaction. For me, maybe it's like kind of been like a stubbornness to accept that the world as I'm perceiving it. You know, when I finally got to the darkest place was in adulthood, which was facing the end of my marriage. It was kind of like the last straw because there are many points through life that I think anybody goes through where these challenges come up. And for me, there was a lot of that. In my teen years, I suffered a lot of loneliness and dark depression. But I think music got me through a lot of that. And I did have friends too. So that also helped. But I just finally, however, in my 30s, I think it was my 30s or was it my 30s? Whenever it was, I facing divorce, I thought there has just got to be another way. And a friend of mine had given me the 7 habits of highly effective people. I thought, okay, well, I'll start there. I had the book and I wasn't reading it. And in that book, it mentions Gandhi. And I thought, oh, I haven't watched the movie Gandhi. I'm going to do that. And had some really big, or, well, looking back, maybe you could say they were moments of micro enlightenment, just this idea of nonviolence and just really hooked me big, which led to Buddhism, led to Alan Watts and a whole bunch of other things. Um, now that I started talking, I forgot your original question. Oh, the challenges of it. Well, that was my biggest challenge. And looking back and now in the present, I see that every single challenge is this growth opportunity. A friend of mine, we call them SGOs, spiritual growth opportunities, um, because every conflict, every stressful moment, I really have seen that it is this holds out this possibility to find more and more peace. And I always liken it. I love the metaphor. When I was living in California, um, learning organic farming, one of the things we did was we pulled up plants from their roots to put them in a bigger field. And the farmer told me that, for 3, 4 days or whatever it is, the plants are in shock. They don't grow at all. But after that period of time, shock, they grow to their full potential because there's plenty of space. I thought, wow, that's such a great metaphor because, somebody says something to me that's like the most hurtful thing that I'm not aware of, you know, like, and just feel this like misery out of that. This is the greatest opportunity I've got, um, especially because I've got the work, you know, and I can I can grow from that. And then maybe the next time I hear that person say it, it's like, yeah, I can find it where that's true, and or you know, I can maybe say like, I understand why you see it that way. I used to think that kind of thing, you know. Um,
If you can give listeners who are watching and who want to embark or who are already in different phases of doing these things, how can they navigate around the challenges that do come up?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I um, can do is to share what it is I do. And, the simplicity of it, the process itself, is to just get honest with myself and ask these questions. In the work I do, is it true? And I start with the most stressful things. Somebody experiences a betrayal in their life. They betrayed me. Is it true? And and I understand how that can be seen as gaslighting, you know. There, like there's an implication, oh, that it's not true. And even though when I ask that question to myself, I am looking for a no, I'm still leaving it open to a yes, that is true, which enables me to go into the rest of the self-inquiry. Um, so, I mean, that's what I do is question what I believe. And and when I say believe, I mean it specifically is that thoughts that I'm attached to. And if if I'm attached to a stressful thought, for for me, I just don't trust that stuff anymore. And so I in my own case, I will look to find that no, and I haven't failed yet. I can always find a no. And there's another part of it where when I know, I don't abandon the part of me that saw it as abandon other people who could see it as true. There's like a holding or a respecting that place where I was under that spell. But when I can find that place, there's like a relief. No, I didn't see that. It's like there's like this epiphany moment. This is why I say epiphany consultant, um, is because there's epiphanies on purpose. It's so much in life, these seem to come like out of the blue, just randomly and so rarely, but it can be done on purpose. And as a matter of fact, that is one of the reasons why I found self-inquiry. There was a part of me that knew this was out there, but I wasn't conscious of it. And the reason why that is because when I was married, I had when my daughter was about 3 or 2, uh, my wife and I had a fight about something, and I after it was over, it wasn't so much a fight, it was really more of a disagreement. Um, but anyway, after it was over, I was kept asking myself this question, what am I missing? And I just could not get past this idea of what seemed so clear to me, you know, that she couldn't see that. And and I had full respect for her intelligence. So I was like, okay, there's got to be something. Maybe I'm missing something here. And when I tell the story, I always wish I could remember what that particular epiphany was, but it took about maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Something novel came to me because there was a maybe stubbornness or maybe even a sense that if I did wait, I could find something new. And when that hit me, I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I went to sleep on that after it happened. I didn't think, oh, I can do that all the time, you know. But that question is a powerful one. What am I missing? I'm missing the other half. I'm missing what I'm ignoring. And so that's, an answer to your question. That's all I can really do. I can't, uh, I don't, as a practice, give advice, even though I may stumble into it. But that is what I've done and found that it things really shift when mind changes.
That sounds very bold to ask that question, what's missing? to get that full picture versus that one part of that picture. And honesty, like we talked about, and really owning the whole of what is versus what I want it to be. It's there's this
Yeah.
I want, the answers I want, and what is it really? And embracing that, is quite liberating and it's freeing. So that's remarkable. And by the way, you're not giving advice, you're sharing your personal journey as well. And if it resonates with someone, sometimes we
Yeah.
do, appreciate ways of going about our lives because we get stuck and we can only see through that one window and we can't, you know, get that full picture. So when we get ideas of how it's possible, and then, of course, we have to do the work. Every individual has to do that work that we started off with. It's you have to be an active participant, whether it be passive active or active active in your life. So yeah, that's amazing. And if you could leave a message for our listeners, what message would that be today?
That's a good question. And happily enough, it's what I was going to say, I think anyway, which is that, one of the challenges is in seeing this and having had the experience of um, a deeper, more resonant truth and better way of seeing the world. There's uh, the pull of the old way of thinking, the pull of the old ways of being, all that conditioning is powerful. And I think anybody knows that. I don't need to tell anybody that. And, it reminds me of that famous quote in The Godfather 3, where Michael is saying, as soon as I think I'm out, they pull me back in, you know, and I think that would be a good characterization for the ego. You get some years of experience having undone the ways that didn't serve oneself, and then but the ego will start to tell you, okay, I'm beyond, I'm good, I'm beyond this now, and boom, it pulls you back in, you know. And so I think in the end, or the takeaway really is kind of what I was referring to earlier, is that I don't think that there there is enlightenment. I think there's only the process of moving constantly towards it. You know, when I did my presentation to get certified, one of the first thing I said when I got the microphone was, I'm enlightened. And I just kind of paused just to wait for the reaction or lack thereof. And I asked everybody, who believes me and that kind of thing. And I said, did anybody stop to think that, you can see me because there's light in this room, therefore I am enlightened? Or did anybody see me come in with that heavy backpack that I put down over in the corner and now I'm enlightened, you know? And, you know, I think this is really indicative or characteristic of this uh, this prison that we get into, is that there's just this, when there's actually this, in including this, but this too, you know. Um, so yeah, the takeaway is that there is no there. It's the word enlightenment, or even being evolved, is like a thing in the future. And, you know, The closer I get to the understanding that I'm looking for, it's even that it's insinuating a future that does not exist. So I can only be awake now. And so to say I'm enlightened, that's past, or I'm gonna get enlightenment, that's a future. It's just like, it's just here now. It's here now, here now, here now. It can't be anything other than that in my experience,
Mm.
which is referring to a past.
Right. And, one question, a self-inquiry question that I thought of as you're speaking is, what am I enlightened to now? Because
Mhm.
it's not about what I want, what I don't know. It's what do I know right now? What am I enlightened to in this very moment? Because like you said, no future, no past. What is it right here, right now? So
Yeah,
just
now,
yeah,
no other when.
right.
That's my
In the
favorite
now.
acronym.
I think that's a very simple message, but yet at the same time, it's so deep as well. So thank you so much, Jerry. I think this was a beautiful conversation.
Thank you too.
Can you just give our audience a little bit about how they can reach out to you and where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook as Jerry X Mac, and my email is jerrymacmail at protonmail.com. And every Sunday, I do a free work session, and you can find it on meetup.com if you search The Work Runs Free.
And I have attended those Sunday night sessions, so they are quite empowering, and there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn, and we'll put all the links, Jerry, that you've just shared with us in the description of the episode. So yeah, it's been great having you. Thank you so much for joining
My
us
pleasure.
today. And Sana,
It
it's that
was,
time of our episode,
Yep, we are two Desi girls
reinventing cultural norms.
with love.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Please rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow the Rabia Sana Show on social medias.
Remember, you can watch the video version on YouTube, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
If you want life coaching services, or you are reinventing cultural norms for yourself and think you would be a great guest and want to be on our show, please email contact@therabiaandsanashow.com.
And be sure to check out our next episode. See you next time.
See you next time.